Hey guys, Tarke here. Since we're 1 week into 3.17, I thought I'd give my 1 week review. Keep in mind this whole thing's from the point of view of an SSF player, and I'm going to break up the video into a few different stages. I'll talk about Atlas, then the Atlas bosses, then Archnemesis, and then kind of like a wrap-up review, everything combined. And let's start off with the Atlas rework. So, I think the Atlas rework's been a real success. Within 1 week, I've pretty much fully completed my Atlas. You can see I've got 115 out of 117 completion. The only things I'm missing are 2 unique maps, which I'll just naturally get in the next couple of days. And I've done all of that in the lifespan of 2 characters. My current character, which is a level 93 Corsica Trickster, and my League start, which I played up until level 86, which was a Bleed Deadeye. Now, I know that you used to be able to complete your Atlas, within a week if you were really gunning for it. But in SSF, that was much more of a journey, and in SSF, that wouldn't be something that I would regularly do. I could regularly play for, up to 2 months and still have 1 or 2 things missing on my Atlas because I just wasn't that motivated to really hunt down that last missing thing. Yeah, like the completion bonus was great, but it didn't feel that impactful. Tying the completion to the Atlas passive tree has been really meaningful, and it makes you really want to chase, like, oh, let's just re-roll my character mission, let's just get 1 more map, and that felt really good. I think the Atlas tree has been a real success. I've spent a lot of regrets respecking it, messing around with it. I get really excited for each point. I'm still missing a couple more points that I'll get from hunting down Maven stuff, and I'm really motivated to hunt down Maven to get my remaining points. It feels super impactful, which I love. I think this is a much, much better system in just the sense that before just seeing a random number go up, which is just giving you quant or map drops or whatever, it doesn't really matter. And even if you just like math out the Atlas skill tree to just, well, it's just what more quant or just more map drops, the fact that you're planning stuff around it, and it feels way more impactful. Like, you're way more excited to get like, ooh, double divination cards. That is just more exciting than, on average earning 1k or small per map. Even if that's what it mathed out to be, it just feels impactful. And, I'm really excited to try lots of different strategies. I've already fully respected my Atlas 3 or 4 times. And that's just from an SSF point of view. I think this is awesome. Like, it's the kind of system where I look forward to starting again from scratch. I would regularly do SSF restarts, so I was getting bored during the League. I would find it fun for a little bit, and I'll kind of lose interest. This is the kind of thing which would make me look forward to restarting my Atlas, and also be motivated to continue progressing that Atlas. I think the Atlas stuff has been a real home run. Yeah, there's a couple of things that I would maybe want to tweak or change from a balancing point of view, but, that's kind of whatever. On that point, I guess I should also mention, I think it's really good. There was a big worry initially about like how mandatory these map drop things would feel. I felt okay without them. I had Shaping the Skies, Seas, and Valleys early on for my initial progression. And then when I first got into Reds, sort of like when I first got like a good base, like maybe 10, 15, tier 11s, I was like, you know what? I can probably afford to drop up these now. I unspecced out of all of them completely, and then progressed all the way up to tier 16s, and it felt good. How many maps do I have? Not like mountains, but, I've got 10 16s, 11 15s, and like this is kind of enough that I'm like, yeah, I don't really need that stuff anymore. I'm kind of happy I don't need to only sustain 1 map. I'm quite happy bouncing between a couple of them, and because I want to be, progressing Maven systems and whatever, that's another neat thing about it, is you're kind of actively encouraged to not just run all of the same maps. So you can see I'm running lots of different tier 14s, so I'm getting all my completion stuff for Atlas things. So I think that's been a real success, and I like that freedom there. I do think it's a little bit weird, the way that some things are laid out, that you have to make certain choices. But having to make choices is a good thing, because that's where opportunity cost comes into, and that's where real specialization comes in. And I think it's very interesting seeing how different people go about doing different things. Would I like to have access to more trees? Yes. I would really like to have 1 tree that was really good for, farming Eater of Worlds, another tree which was really good for farming Searing Exarch, but is what it is. So from that point of view, I think that's been a real success. Now let's talk about the actual bosses themselves. So I've done all of the new bosses at least once. and I've done all of them blind, and you can see all of those blind boss fights up on my YouTube channel. I will just say briefly, it's been quite funny watching people react to them, because there's been not everyone, but especially with the most recent Pinnacle one, like the one I did for Eater of Worlds, I found quite interesting, where people clicked on the video saying blind boss fight, and then they were rinsing me in the comments for not knowing the mechanic of the fight, and it's like, well, yeah, dude, I went in blind, I didn't get it, like, yeah. And that kind of comes into the big thing. I think there's a real intuitive problem. I don't think the new fights are intuitive. I think the Searing Exarch and Blackstar are far more intuitive. I think the Searing Exarch himself is pretty much spot on in that regard. There's only one kind of mechanic which is a bit of a gotcha, which is his incendiary charge up. I was like, do I need to stand in this or not stand in this? I found out you don't stand in it. If you stand in it, you get one shot. So I'm like, okay, that's that. And then the rest of the fight, super straightforward, super mechanical. And it's just a case of dodge the things. He has a cool little maze thing. Don't stand in that. It's a little bit hectic. But otherwise, the fight's kind of easy. And that's one thing I found a little bit odd. So in Eater of Worlds, there was one mechanic that it didn't clock for me for whatever reason. And I think the reason why it didn't clock for me is you can... Basically, he has a phase where he charges up this AoE, and if you don't do the mechanic, it's near entire screen wide one-shot. If you do the mechanic correctly, Maven stops him from doing the mechanic. And what I didn't know is it's not an entire one screen, like one shot. Like, it doesn't fill the entire screen. It only fills like 80% of the screen. So the first time I dodged it, I thought I did the mechanic correctly. I'm like, oh, he didn't cover the entire screen. I ran through the things I was meant to run to. I'm now hugging this side of the map, and there's a safe spot. That's how you're meant to do the fight. So I continued to do that for all the preceding phases where he did that thing, which is me making the fight way harder for myself, because if I'd actually done the mechanic correctly, it wouldn't have happened at all. Which, I mean, I guess it's kind of fine, but it was a little bit irritating. Compared to his mini-boss, though, with the swamp phase, that's an absolute joke. That has to be one of the most unintuitive things I've ever seen in Path of Exile. And I don't even mind, like, GGG flexing their boss design skills and making really obscure fights, or making very difficult fights, and making very challenging fights. But I feel like there needs to be some kind of setup, because it's just so far removed from the mapping experience. The vast majority of the mapping experience is just run, click, 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 pick up the loot, barely any thinking. They're trying to make you think a little bit more by reading things. Like, you need to read alters, and you need to read some of the scary new map mods. But it's a pretty mindless experience the vast majority of the time. And when like 99% of Path of Exile is just don't stand in the thing, and then suddenly you're introducing boss fights which need you to be soaking damage in certain parts of the floor, purposely drowning, doing all of these weird things, it's fine, but it just feels so disconnected and so far removed from the rest of the game. I really struggled with it. And I think I probably would have struggled with it less if I went into those fights blind, playing a different video game. I think I'd have found them way easier, but I found them so far removed from the usual Path of Exile experience, I really struggled with learning them. At least all of them but Searing Exarch. Searing Exarch I found very straightforward, very whatever. Blackstar I think is a cool fight. Going back and watching the VOD, it's something that if you can go back and actually watch footage of it, it's a pretty straightforward fight. I found that super hectic and super hard to understand initially, because there were just so many spinning plates. You've got rotating debuffs on the floor, which is a pretty novel thing from a Path of Exile point of view. You then have pillars, and having to soak pillars or not soak pillars. Okay, having to line of sight boss abilities isn't that crazy, but now the pillars are destroying and repairing. Okay, that's a new thing. We've now got these ads, and you need to manage the ads based on your debuffs, and massive screen-wide AoE, and, you know, it's kind of like, ugh. And it just felt kind of weird that, like, you had that as the mini-boss, and then the big daddy boss, mechanically, so much more simple. Like, the upgraded version, the big scary thing is don't stand on the thing on the floor. And like that just is a perfect example of how I find these things like so bizarre and so backwards. A mini boss has way more mechanics, like way more things that you need to be tracking than the big scary new bad. Like, it's the same kind of thing with like the whole Maven memory phase. Some people might like it, some people don't mind it, but it's kind of like, if you know it's there, it's not that bad. But like a lot of Path of Exile boss mechanics just feel like gotcha moments now, where it's kind of like they're just there to one-shot you the first time you go in, and then once you learn the mechanic, you don't need to think about it at all. That's one of the reasons why I think the Black Star fight is really good, and also one of the things I think is good about the Searing Exarch fight, is with the Black Star, once you've learned the mechanics of the fight, you still need to manage everything. Like, you still need to be, like, managing the floor, managing your debuff stacks, making sure that you're, like, am I going to soak this one, or am I going to line of sight it with the pillar? Like, you still need to actively engage with it. Compare that to the Hunger boss with the Swamp mechanic. Once you know what you're meant to do in the Swamp, you never have any worries with that fight, and the fight becomes easy. Searing Exarch, once you know what to do in that fight, you still need to manage the bullet hell phase at the end, so it's still an interesting, engaging fight. The Eater of Worlds fight, once you know how to bypass his one scary one-shot mechanic, well, it's a pretty easy fight. It's just, I don't know, to me that all seems a little bit weird. So I think the tuning on the bosses is a bit odd, and I think the design behind the bosses is also like a little confused. I think their loot is really interesting though, and I think it's really cool that we want to chase down these bosses, and if you don't like them, their loot tables are so rewarding that you want to from a unique point of view. And then from a crafting point of view, their crafting currencies is really interesting, and I really like the new Eldritch system. So from an implicit crafting point of view, I think that is a complete win. It's just a shame that with how much I love the new Atlas system and how much I love the new Atlas crafting and the influence and the drops, that the fights themselves are what let it down for me. I think that's a little bit of a shame. But maybe it's just a thing of, you know, once I've learned the fights more, once I've spent a league or two with them, maybe I'll grow to appreciate them more. It's kind of like, I'm kind of I wouldn't say I'm a fan, but like I quite enjoy doing this Cirrus fight now. I still think the Cirrus fight is a poor fight compared to stuff like Uber Elder or Zia and stuff like that. But I do quite enjoy doing it now that I've got the muscle memory down. So maybe, you know, it's just one of those things of I haven't done the new fights enough time to really develop an appreciation for them, and the more I do them, maybe the more I'll appreciate them. But that's beside the by. Now let's talk about Archnemesis itself. Archnemesis has proven to be a much more interesting and a much more engaging league than expected. I have some serious issues with its user experience though. GDG has recently said they're going to make some changes to the UI, which is good, but we don't know what they are. So until we know what they are, I can't really comment on that thing. But I can just say the initial current week 1 user experience of Archnemesis is awful. So hopefully that'll be something that improves. Saying that though, assuming they do improve that, I really like the hunting down the little things, building the recipes up in my head, kind of thinking what I'm going to be doing with them. I think it's a far more engaging system than Metamorph. Far more engaging system than Metamorph. I've always found Metamorph to be kind of lame. I liked the idea of building your own boss fight, but then to what end? It kind of felt half-finished, because it was a half-finished league. There was meant to be this big new boss thing. There was the whole thing with Tane's Laboratory, which just kind of went nowhere. I would much prefer Archnemesis went into the game and they took out Metamorph. They can't, because there's a Metamorph stash tab. I don't know, maybe they could like refund players, I don't know. But I think Archnemesis is the kind of mechanic that I would like to see going core into the game. From a gameplay point of view, it's the same kind of things that I like about Expedition. You're making choices that matter, but if you don't want to think, you can be thoughtless. Saying that, there are a few very weird balance choices with some of the Archnemesis mods. Some of the effects the actual mods themselves do are ridiculous. Catmaster recently made a video after he died in hardcore to, I believe it was the Malediction one, which makes players take 50% more damage, which just seems a little bit bizarre. Some of the balancing, some of the tuning of Archnemesis, not too keen on, but the actual like reward structure, the way it makes you think, the way it leans into other systems, I think that's all really positive. From a reward point of view, I've not gone like too crazy with it. I've done a fair bit. My character is pretty well juiced up. We're rocking double 6 links. Now, to be fair, both of those are manual 6 links, and I got very lucky with both of them. Both of them, I was just trying to 5 link. This was a 6 link in under 100 views. I think it was like 70, and this was like the same deal again. So that was purely like a luck thing. In terms of currency, you can see, you know, I've got a decent-ish amount for this point in SSF, the amount I've played. I've got some pretty cool like tier 1 uniques that I've collected. I've collected a few nice things like multiple Dead Reckoning jewels, etc. I think the reward for a like base user experience, like if you're just doing like a little bit of juice, like a little bit of the big recipes, I think is good. The extreme is very extreme, so maybe that would have to be changed a little bit if it went into the core game, but you know, from a timeline point of view, the amount of time it takes to set up the recipes, I think it's kind of fine if you're getting this massive payout, like you're dropping like multiple exalts from, you know, building up the perfect combination of like double roll, triple roll, currency, Treant Horde, all of that stuff. So I think Archnemesis is getting the thumbs up. Is it something that will keep me engaged super long term? Hopefully, yes. I think it has a better chance to keep me engaged compared to something like Metamorph, because you have the goal of building up to a big recipe. And I think that goal of building up to a big recipe is very important, because that's the thing with Path of Exile. It's all about having things to keep you engaged. So if your goal is, I want to build up this like perfect combo, and it's going to take me like 100 maps or 200 maps to get all the upgrades and get all the pieces, and that's good. It's giving you a goal for those 100, 200 maps. And now that I've completed my Atlas progression, and I'm just missing like a couple of Maven things on a couple of unique maps, this is where I'm worried a little bit with this system. I think this is the best week 1 system of any Atlas we've had. Will this keep me engaged once I've finished all my Maven stuff, once I've got my last 2 Void Stones? That's another question. Hopefully the answer to that would be yes, because then it's going to be a case of I will then continue to get more enjoyment out of min-maxing and changing my skill tree. And assuming they tweak the Atlas passive skill tree between leagues, even just like shuffling some things around, like maybe, you know, for this league you have Abyss and Expedition on this side, but next league you swap them with Delve and Breach. Then like, ooh, that could be interesting. Like, just doing little things like swapping stuff around, doing a little juggle like that, could add a lot of longevity to the system. So all in all, I would probably, if I had to give this an arbitrary ranking out of 10, I'd probably give it, the whole package, I'd probably give like an 8. Losing 1 point for the pinnacle bosses, and losing 1 point for the poor UI experience with Archnemesis. Assuming they can fix that, I'd bump it up to a 9. And I mean, unless they're planning on doing some substantial changes to how the bosses work, which I don't think they will, I think a 9 out of 10 is a good score. So yeah, I'd say it's a solid 8. I'm Tarke. How would you rate your whole experience? What do you think of the new bosses? What do you think of the whole Atlas system? What do you think of the league mechanic, etc.? Have a good day. Bye-bye.